Welcome to Sister Sister, a special series from Brooklyn Peace Center's podcast, Teaching Peace. I'm your host, Zipporah, a student at Bard High School for Early College in Brooklyn. I care deeply about justice, human rights, and creating space for young people, especially young women like myself, to lead and make real change. In each episode, I talk with women from communities impacted by war, displacement, and genocide. We center their stories, their resilience, their leadership, and their work to heal and transform the world around them. Thanks for listening. To understand what's happening in Sudan today, we need to look at its past. Sudan became independent in 1956 after British-Egyptian rule, but soon after, civil wars broke out, mostly between the north, where most people are Arab and Muslim, and the south, where many are Christian or follow traditional African religions. That division led to the creation of South Sudan in 2011. But Sudan's struggles didn't stop here. Violence continued, especially in regions like Darfur. In 2019, Sudanese people overthrew dictator Omar al-Bashir. It was a moment of hope, but the military held on to power. Then, in April 2023, two generals who were supposed to be allies turned against each other. The Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces went to war, and the country has been torn apart. Millions have been forced to flee. Many face hunger, violence, and displacement. Just recently, the National Army said it retook the capital, Khartoum. But the fighting is far from over, and yet, through it all, the people of Sudan keep rising up, calling for peace, justice, and a better future. Today's guest is Reem Abbas. Reem is a Sudanese feminist writer, researcher, and activist. She served as a communications coordinator at the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and she previously hosted their podcast, Mobilizing Men for Feminist Peace. Her writing explores the intersection of gender, resistance, and authoritarianism in Sudan, including in her powerful book, Undoing Resistance. Reem has also contributed research to organizations like the African Women's Development Fund, Safer World, and the U.S. Institute of Peace. She's been a fellow of the Tahrir Institute, a leader in the Mansam Coalition of Sudanese women, and a passionate advocate for feminist peace building. Oh, and she's also a mom too. And here's a fun fact. Reem is a certified master barista in Turkish coffee. Reem, welcome to the show. We're so honored to have you.
Thank you so much, Bora, and I'm very happy to be here with you.
So, before we dive into your story, let's start with a few quick fire questions just to break the ice and get to know you a little bit better. So, what is your go-to hype song when you need a confidence boost?
Okay, the funny song is called the Affirmation Song by Snoop Dogg and a group. And it's actually marketed towards kids, but I just love it. It's an amazing affirmation song that I always turn on for myself and my daughter.
Affirmations are positive statements that help us to challenge and overcome when you're not feeling good and have negative thoughts. So repeat after me. Come on, everyone.
Oh, it's so nice. If you could have coffee with any inspiring woman, past or present, who would it be?
I would definitely say it's Mayra Souk. Mayra Souk is a Lebanese writer, activist, and also she's the founder of an Arabic bookstore in London. So she survived the Lebanese Civil War and she wrote two amazing books. One of my favorite books is called Leaving Beirut. It's a book that she wrote about the Lebanese Civil War. She's amazing. She's definitely the activist that I hope to be because she's an educationalist, she's an activist, and she gives a lot to the community. And also just sharing a very personal story is something that's very brave. So I would love to have, coffee with her. May her soul rest in peace.
If you could wake up tomorrow fluent in any language, which would you choose?
I would take Spanish. I mean, just to read more books, from like South America. I mean, I just love the Spanish language and I just love the literature coming out of South America. So if there's something that's not translated and I just don't have access to, I would love to be fluent in Spanish and to get to read it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And last one. What's a form of media you've been enjoying lately? It could be a book, an album, a podcast, or a show.
So many. I mean, a book, I recently reread Jared Diamond, Gun, Germs, and Steel, which is a really good book. I read it a very long time ago. But, there's some books that you just feel that later in life, you have a different understanding and you want to go back and reread it with sort of a different insight. And podcast, I mean, a lot, I've been enjoying also the cartoon podcast. Recently it's by this architecture/activist/women's rights or human rights oriented studio in Sudan. So I just love the work that they're doing. And so I'm kind of trying to go back to listening to podcasts again.
You were born and raised in Sudan. You've done journalism, feminist research, and activism. How did growing up in Sudan shape your passion for truth-telling?
My family has a very interesting story. So we left Sudan for some time when I was very young because my dad was having problems with the government. So we had to go into exile. He was basically getting hunted down and he lost his job before that. And he was banned from working just anywhere, like the private sector organizations and of course the government sector where he used to work at the Ministry of Health. Our life in Sudan was disrupted. And we had to leave in very difficult circumstances. My dad was smuggled out of the country. We followed him. And then we spent years living abroad in exile. But we spent years living abroad just kind of thinking about Sudan. My dad always wanted to stay close to home because he always had this hope of going back. And for many years after he left, because he fled the country, he had this, he was banned in a way. So even from returning back. So his first time to return back was 10 years later when there was this burden basically on him and like many other people. So in a way, we grew up with this in a very activist household, just yearning, to go back and thinking about our country and our parents continued their activism from abroad. So I think this really just made me love Sudan. And I loved Sudan and I loved also fighting for justice in Sudan. And this is why when I returned, I started out as a journalist, but then automatically I found myself also an activist. And a lot of my editors used to tell me, you are very activist in your writing, but I really felt that it's difficult to separate your writing and your journalism from your activism when you're in a country where there's so much happening. For example, I was an arts and culture editor and writer. So I would go to interview a writer. And then when I get to his place, I would find out that this writer, his books were, for example, banned and they were confiscated and so on. So in a way, the piece changes from being about the writer and his writings to this ban on books and why this is happening. So I think my experience, like my personal experience, living in exile, living in refugee at some point, as a refugee at some point, and having this family that just gave so much to Sudan and always wanted to serve their country, shaped my understanding and made me really believe that that it takes a lot of courage to just really fight for justice, but it's something that we all have to do collectively for us to get to a Sudan where there is freedom, there is like peace, there is all the different things that many have died fighting for.
In your journalism work, it can be so hard to separate current events from like art and all those things because everything's so intertwined.
Yeah. And there was a price to pay. There was a price to pay where at some point you get labeled as like the problematic person, the person that is bringing some kind of problems. And I remember this experience I had when the Khartoum State Police, they filed a complaint against me at the prosecution office. And then I ended up losing my job as a result. But it was not framed like, oh, we're firing you because of this case. It was like, oh, we don't have money to pay you. And at the time, like the money I used to get as an editor was so little that my dad used to basically support me, right? Mm-hmm. But then for me, it was like, getting labeled as the problematic, as the person just kind of like going to bring problems to newspapers and so on. I did not mind that. I did not mind this reputation at all, actually, because I felt that this is part of like, you have to pay a little price
Yeah.
And it's a small price for me because I do come from privilege. I have to say that. But also I was willing to go ahead and pay this price because I knew that I had a goal.
And what you're doing is so powerful because that is true journalism. Journalism isn't like saying what the media wants you to say. True journalism is saying what needs to be said and saying the true stories that people know. And you doing that is just so powerful, especially in the midst of everything that was going on.
Absolutely. And I think this is why over the last few years I have shifted. So I stopped doing full-time journalism and I started doing more like writing because I feel that as the writer, I can control what I want to write about. So I pitch things and I write what I want about what I want. I'm not really tied to an editorial kind of guideline or editorial line. So, and I feel more comfortable doing that, just seeing myself as a writer because I want to have this freedom. I want to say what I want to say without being held back basically by a lot of policies and editorial guidelines and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. In your book, Undoing Resistance, looks at 30 years of authoritarian rule. What was it like to document that history?
Amazing experience. I mean, and I have to say, like Zipporah, I feel that this book was released to 2023, and I feel that now I would love to go back and write it and rewrite it because I have a different perspective right now. But I think when we started looking at the book and researching it, we really wanted to understand, how did the cultural field in Sudan, how did it sustain itself during the 30 years of authoritarian rule, Omar al-Bashir, 1989 to 2019. And because I was so inspired, and I was part of this cultural kind of artistic field, right? And I was so inspired by its collectiveness, people coming together, the solidarity you find, how people support each other. And even though there's very few resources actually, for journalists and writers and activists in Sudan. So in a way, I really just wanted to focus on telling the story of how they continued fighting for justice and at the same time, they continued producing amazing arts for 30 years. And what we found was really inspiring. We saw a decentralized movement trying to do so much in all parts of Sudan. And we saw people really just fighting to make sure that Sudan still has an art culture. People going to hold events in places like cultural centers and so on, and then they get banned, and then the security comes and confiscates everything, and they end up having kind of like cultural salons inside private homes. We saw people smuggling books because they wanted the books to be read. We saw people fighting so hard and paying out of their pocket to just kind of produce albums and music and so many things. And this is the inspiring story that we wanted to tell. So we traveled to a few places, we spoke to so many people, and we told part of the story, right? Because you can never really tell the whole story in any book. But we're happy that at least, we got to do that.
How would you say your understanding of resistance has changed over time?
Resistance is so broad, especially in the context of Sudan. When I just saw that, for example, during the revolution and during the protest movement, I saw that so many people were contributing to resistance in their own way. It was very inspiring. So I think people opening their homes to receive protesters was resistance, right? Because you open up your home, you give people tea and coffee, but then you're protecting them. This is resistance.
Yeah.
People cooking for protesters is resistance. People smuggling books basically to make sure that people read them. This is resistance. People in government offices making sure that the books confiscated do not get burned is resistance. People selling plots of land and jewelry to make a play happen. This is resistance. So I think this connectiveness, this community coming together to resist authoritarian, like dictatorship, to resist basically this very kind of brutal rule that wanted people to stay impoverished when it comes to knowledge. It wanted them to stay absolutely really just not read and completely detach themselves from culture and their culture. So many. I think resistance is not just kind of being politically active, but just really building and organizing together. Yeah. This is all resisting.
Many people have heard of the Darfur genocide, but not its ongoing impact. How has that violence shaped Sudan's present reality?
when I think about what happened in Darfur and the fact that Sudan has been, of course, at war for the past decades, in a few decades, I think this total impunity is shaping today's conflict. Impunity in the sense that there was never justice, right? So many men, and especially soldiers, got away with sexual violence. There was so much political violence. People arrested just for saying their opinion, and there was total impunity, this like lack of justice. And the fact that kind of in a way, so many people were complicit in this lack of justice is shaping today's conflict. Because I think people got to a point where when you start seeing violence as the only kind of answer, it's because you get to a point where you're like, I'm not going to get justice otherwise. The only way to get justice is to take up arms and kind of fight or defend myself or so on. And I think like for people to rebuild this trust with the state and rebuild trust like within the community, so like between different communities, because the social fabric has been totally destroyed and violated due to this war. This needs time, and this needs people to really work and bring justice and make people feel that they can access justice in this lifetime and in Sudan. So I think definitely this total impunity by which violations happen in Darfur in South Sudan and are now happening in Khartoum and all parts of Sudan is just because people were never brought to justice, and then you just find killers on the streets or even in basically in positions of power. And you feel that, you know what, you get basically this system of rewarding warlords is not working because you're actually encouraging more people to use violence because they will get rewarded and they will get a piece of the cake.
You've written about racial and ethnic divisions. How have those divisions fueled conflict, and how are Sudanese people, especially women, challenging those narratives?
I think this is definitely a very tough question because I feel that Sudan, as a present-day Sudan, with its current borders and its current structure, it's a country that was made by the colonial forces, definitely. So it's not an organic body that was formed together by people fighting to be together like other countries. So this common struggle of coming together, I don't think we just have it in Sudan. And this is why when from the get-go, from independence, we had issues. We had issues with people feeling connected to the state, with people feeling that the state actually reflects their interests and reflects their beliefs and value. So we've always had this disconnect between so many communities and their state. And so many, racial and ethnic divisions. A lot of the rebellions that were fought in Sudan were fought on ethnic grounds. This war right now that is being marketed as a war between quote unquote two generals is actually a social war. It's between different communities coming together, and politics is it's a way to sugarcoat the current conflict, but the core of the conflict, it's a social conflict. And I feel that if you do not really describe things as they are, you cannot resolve the problem. So if you keep saying this is a war between two generals, you're never going to get to the solution because you just start basically, if you change the narrative of the war and if you change the reasons behind the war and what is happening, you will get to a solution that is not going to solve the problems. The other thing is, I do see people challenging narratives. I do see that there's a lot of division and there's also a lot of collectiveness. A lot of division in the sense that when so many crimes have been committed, like by people against each other, communities against each other, and a lot of discrimination, and the narrative itself around this war is very, very racist, very, very violent, very dehumanizing. You dehumanize the others, right? It's definitely a complete violation of the social fabric. It's really ugly, right? But in the sense, I feel that this war, it either leads to the disintegration of the state in Sudan, or it brings people together to build a state that is better. So I still don't know where this is going to lead because we're still processing. We're still in the situation, but I am seeing both things. I'm seeing people coming together. I'm seeing solidarity. I'm seeing people opening up their homes to displaced people from different regions, feeding them and making sure that they're safe and showing real solidarity and empathy. And I'm also seeing a very ugly side. So how this is going to manifest, this is still something we're processing.
So, Sudan has also seen deep religious tensions. How have these
Mhm.
been used politically, and what do interfaith peace efforts look like on the ground?
I think there are two sides of this, the religious tensions. First, definitely during the war with South Sudan, like when South Sudan, at the time it was Southern Sudan, was fighting the central government. Religion kind of, because, when war is fought for such a long time, the reasons change, right? So you
Yeah.
start by having specific demands, and then halfway you get influenced by internal and external factors. So the reasons change. So all of a sudden, for example, this deep religious divide became very prevalent, and from both sides, right? From the side of the Southern Sudan, and also the central government, that was a religious war. So at the time, religious tensions were very deep between the elites, right, that were fighting this war. But when it comes to the community level, it was not so deep, because the way in Sudan, like even the Islam that is practiced and is very moderate, it's very Sufi, it's very respectful, right? But then when the elites maneuver and use religion as a political kind of ideology, then it becomes an issue.
Yeah.
The other thing is, after that, after the separation of South Sudan, we also saw this crackdown by the central government on discrimination against Christian leaders. And this was interesting because part of it was, yes, we are cracking down on some of the churches, but also part of it was deeper. It had economic interests as well. So part of it was, for example, they want to do land grabs, and they saw
Yeah.
that the churches, and which are very huge in Khartoum specifically, are sitting on very, very expensive land. So they used this idea of pressuring and intimidating the Christian community, for example, at the time, to do land grabs and to
Yeah.
take over land that they saw as very profitable. So in a way, when economic interests are married with some kind of discrimination or discriminatory kind of behavior, it becomes really ugly. So
Yeah.
this is what we saw for a long time. In this war, like, religion is not very much prominent, but the conversation on secularism is very prominent. So the conversation on one side saying that we are fighting for a secular Sudan, and the other side is saying this is not something that you could pressure, or like kind of, this is not something that you could impose on the people, and it should come through a very organic process. This is the kind of conversation that we're having. But I think right now, with this very deep political and ethnic polarization, we cannot have a conversation about how the country should be ruled. It's very difficult to have a conversation on secularism, for example, because it carries a lot, right? It carries a lot of connotations right now to say, I believe in this, I believe in that. But this is definitely, the three things that I wanted to talk about.
You've worked with Sudanese women leading protests, including through MANSAM, also called Women of Sudanese Civic and Political Groups. What have those women taught you about courage, leadership, and the future of Sudan?
Mensam was a very interesting experience. I was in the coordination committee between 2019 to 2022. And at the time, we had a lot of power, but also very little power. A lot of power in the sense that we were interviewing women, we were recommending women to become ministers, we were fighting for women's political participation a lot, right? But then also, one of the things that I was taught is that political participation is not an objective. It's a means. And if women see it as an objective, that's a problem. So we do not want women to be represented, or we do not want women to participate in politics and a decision-making position. We want women to participate in decision-making positions to basically promote our agenda as women. Better laws, less discriminatory laws, better rights, and talk about and have all the difficult conversations on our behalf. And I think there was a lot of courage. People would protest for days for better participation, to change the laws. Women had so many demands. But what I was taught is that there was a gap between the elitist women who just wanted to be in power and the women who really had serious demands of issues that were so pressing and were really impacting their lives. And I found that this was sad, because at the end of the day, we really wanted women to represent us and represent our agenda and our values, but which we just did not see that. I feel that the experience is definitely something that can be replicated. And I feel that we have a long way to go as women. And also the fact that in Sudan, the governance system is a political marketplace and it's very militarized. So men with guns really control a lot and they get a lot of perks and they get a lot of political position, political power and so on. So I feel that unless we limit, the number and how men with guns control the narrative and control the country, women will continue to be in the periphery. So it's a long struggle for us, but the first thing we need to do as women is to really just understand that it's in our interest to identify what we want and the kind of like pressing issues that we want women in power to fight for.
The image of women in white robes leading chants became iconic. Can you talk about how women use culture to resist both militarism and patriarchy?
Absolutely. And I think they use culture and history. Was the wearing the yellow kind of tobe and she was standing on top of the car. She was chanting like my grandmother is a Kandaka. Kandaka women. So Kandakas are like queens basically of like old Nubian kingdom. They ruled the old Nubian kingdom. So Sudan had women rulers who were so strong. And they ruled a lot of present-day parts of Sudan, and also they expanded their rule. They were extremely strong. So I think we try to embody and manifest kind of their strong energy, and we try to manifest that women once ruled this land and they made it better. So how can we convince the community again that we have this kind of leadership to do that and to improve our country? So in a way, like we do have social norms that are discriminating against women. This is a fact. A lot of norms about in some places where women are taken out of school, there's early marriage, there are harmful practices, women face discrimination in the workforce and so on. But at the same time, we also have a lot of cultural practices and cultural, I would say, solidarity. So a lot of women get support from the women in their families, the grandmothers, the extended family, to keep them going. And they are your biggest supporters. They are the ones supporting you in your home, taking care of your kids so you can work and so you can become a leader. So this is definitely something that we always lean back on the older women in our family and extended family and even in our community to come together. Women are always coming together to empower themselves economically through, for example, saving funds. They start saving funds together. And this is not something outside of the bank system completely, but this is also something for women to have money and to have some kind of seed funding to start a small business. So in a way, we do realize that a lot of for us to really be able to tackle and confront patriarchy, we have to economically empower women. Women need to have money to have choices. Having money gives you choices in life, and it gives you the ability to have an opinion and to really state out your opinion without fear, because no one is going to take away food from you or is going to subjugate you. So this is one of the things that I feel that we're definitely using a lot of culture and this culture of solidarity and sisterhood, and this culture of sisterhood is deeply embedded within the Sudanese community to confront patriarchy.
I could not agree with you more, because I love financial literacy and I love economics. Since I was little, I've had a business where I sell cookies wholesale to stores. And so my teachers were asking me about it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make an economics team at school to educate about financial literacy and the importance of it. And I feel like it's just so important, young women in every single country, to be empowered economically so that they have the choice to free themselves from whatever place that they can be in.
Absolutely. I remember years ago, I used to work at this organization called Siha Network, and they used to work with women in the informal sector, like petty traders, tea sellers, things like that. And I remember how they used to train them on financial literacy, like, for example, using a calculator. And it was life-changing for them, by the way, because they were able to start thinking about profit, how much money they need to invest, how much money, the cost of the things that they had to buy for their business. So I think this is very important because it really teaches them a lot about financial literacy, but also about saving, about growing their business, about also including others in their business.
Yeah.
It's really important.
It's so important for us as women of color, to support each other economically and to pass down the wisdom that we know.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you once wrote about smuggling books into Sudan. What role have culture, faith, or community played in helping you resist despair?
Yeah. So this was actually a story. It's my dad's story. He wrote books and they were banned. So I wrote the story of how we were trying to figure out why they were banned. And we had to communicate with this office that kind of gives book licenses and gives them the get-go for them to be sold in the market and so on. And we couldn't find an answer. And we were just following up with this person that supposedly read the book and decided on the ban. And this person ended up getting sick, traveling abroad, getting treatment, and then passing away and so on. So I think my dad's books were tied to someone who was unable to communicate with their office and tell them, look, this book needs to be given another chance or something. So I think it was a very interesting experience that shows how like your whole life could be impacted by one person just because of a personal preference or a decision. And this like lack of institutionalism when it comes to how things are handled in Sudan. So at some point we gave up and we decided to smuggle his books into Sudan. And in a way, smuggling books is definitely a lot of community because a lot of people have to be complicit, right? You can't carry a lot of books. So you kind of give a lot of people coming into Sudan copies of the books and you trust them, making sure that they are strong enough that they're going to stand up if anything happens and that they're going to basically end up actually bringing the books in their bags. They're not going to get scared. So a lot of it is really just relying on the community. And in a way, we all become like complicit in this, but in a way, we all support each other because everyone that put the books in their bags and brought them into Sudan knew that it was banned. So they knew the risks, right? But then they believed in the message in the book and they believed that people had to read and make their own opinion when it comes to the book. You cannot just ban a book because you don't like it, right?
Yeah.
So it was definitely like amazing just to see the experience, to see also people taking the risk to have like launch events for the books at different locations, knowing that it was banned. I remember going to my dad's launch event and I just remember how people, like we were kind of scared about the guests because we're like, there are so many people coming here to attend this book launch, but what if something happens? You know, what if they get arrested? We're going to feel bad. But then just being present there and knowing that people came to support us, knowing that they knew the risk when it comes to coming to the book launch. But it was amazing. It showed really a lot of just values of resistance and of collectiveness and of people really believing in the book basically and believing that people need to access it. It was really amazing. Definitely a moment of resilience.
As someone who's reporting from conflict zones, have you ever felt unsafe? What helps you stay grounded and keep going?
For many years, like just kind of writing about Sudan, about different things, I mean, yes, I did face intimidation for some of the writings I do, whether it's in like articles or even on social media. But I just feel that I've always felt that I had a message. And this is part of my contribution to my country and to the community that I hope to speak and share their messages. So yes, sometimes I did feel a bit insecure. And recently I had this incident that made me feel insecure, and unsafe. But I honestly feel that I don't know, like part of me just feels that I should just keep going, regardless of the risk. I should just keep going.
We commend you for your great work. For people listening who want to support Sudan, but don't know where to start, what are 3 meaningful actions they can take?
The first thing is to support different organizations providing much needed food and medicine and so on for people on the ground. The best organization to go to right now is, of course, the Khartoum Community Kitchen and also the Sudanese American Physicians Association, who are doing like great work supporting medical care on the ground for very vulnerable communities. So donating, even if it just anything from $5 is good. It helps people get fed. $5 is enough for a family to get food over like 2 days or so. So definitely Khartoum Community Kitchen and TAPA, so the American Physicians Association, supporting them, donating to them. The other thing is also just giving, like you're doing right now with Zipporah, giving Sudanese activists and different community members a chance to speak and a chance to comment and a chance to have a platform, basically. This is very important, what you're doing right now. And the third is just to listen to the voices on social media, listen to what people are saying, take part in activist events on Sudan that are happening Sometimes there are different marches going in Washington and in different places in the US, calling for, of course, like the UAE, for example, to stop supporting and arming the militia and so on. So I feel that just activism, supporting and donating to the different organizations that I mentioned and giving Sudanese activists a platform is really a great start.
Looking ahead, what are your hopes for yourself, for Sudanese women, and for the global movement towards feminist peace?
For me, just to be able to live with my family in Sudan again and not leave and not have to leave because of the war and not have to leave my house and my community in very difficult circumstances. And this feeling of displacement and this feeling of disruption and this feeling of like just being and just living in limbo that I've had for the past few months. I do not wish this on anyone. And I really just hope that my family and also other families can return to their homes and can return to their lives. And it's just everyday routine of feeling safe also in your home can return to people. And I hope this happens all over Sudan, not only where I live in Khartoum. For Sudanese women, I really hope that any conversation on the cost of war and any conversation on reparation takes into consideration the vulnerable women who were subjected to kidnapping, who were subjected to political prostitution, who were subjected to forced prostitution, trafficking, and were subjected to sexual and gender-based violence. They need to be compensated. They need to be supported when it comes to integration into the society. They need to be given support to really just get back to their lives and get their lives back together. And they need support when it comes to, of course, like seeking professional psychosocial support and health and treatment and so on. So Sudanese women really, like, they are bearing the brunt of this war and they need to be supported. For the global movement towards feminist peace, I feel that we really need to have a conversation about double standards in the world.
Yeah.
And how there is a lot of idea that like people in countries like Sudan and so on do not deserve to have peace or democracy. They do not deserve this, and that we are just inherently evil and violent people. So I feel that the stereotypes and about us just need to finish and people need to listen to us. What is happening in Sudan, this war is ugly, but I don't think that we're ugly people. I think that there's so much hope and there's so much kindness in Sudan that I saw and I have witnessed, and many people have witnessed for a very long time. And I just hope that the peace process in Sudan and I do wish that there's peace in Sudan and for the other countries, whether it's, Palestine, whether it's the DRC, all the other countries that are struggling right now, because I feel that we all deserve a rest and we all deserve a chance to just have a normal life, basically.
Speaking of which, this series is all about global sisterhood. What does sisterhood mean to you, and how has it shown up in your life or your work?
So many. I remember a few years ago, I joined this online book club, or like a book club, or like a basically online platform where people post their books and their libraries, and then they start discussing different books. And I remember I got messages from women from different places in the world saying, "Oh, you're in Sudan. If there are any books that you can't find there, we're so happy to send them to you." And the level of kindness and the level of someone just going out of their way to try to support you, knowing that you're not going to have access to the amount of books that they have, is really nice. And you just do feel that this is global sisterhood. Like, I mean, this is how I felt. So many women and all over the world that have stepped up and that have gone out of their way to support and make the voices of Sudanese women heard. And they've never visited Sudan. They probably don't know anything about it, but they just care. So I think caring and doing something about it, this is how it should be. And this is how, I'm also inspired to do so many things because of other women who I find inspiring and who I find that they go out of their way trying to help, trying to speak out, trying to do something about it. So global sisterhood is just understanding that that you're not fine until we are all fine. And we all have to do one small thing, whatever we can, whatever is within our bandwidth to make it better for women in other parts of the world.
Where can people follow your writing, your podcast, or support your work?
Our podcast, the first season of Mobilizing Mental Feminist Peace, it's still on Spotify and on all platforms, Apple Podcasts, everywhere. So you could find it there. And my writing, I post a lot. I have a link tree that I can share. And try to update it with my writing. And I'm also very active on X under Reem Write. And and then I write in different publications. I always share it on X. So I hope people can follow me there.
Yes. Go follow her. What was your username again on X?
Reem Write.
Reem Write.
Yes.
Before we go, I want to ask about care. You're a mother writer. What is something that brings you joy each day?
I think having the chance to be with my daughter and having her in school. I mean, children in Sudan have not been in school mostly for the past 2 years. So I think right now I'm just so happy that she's in school and she's stable and I'm able to provide her with this opportunity. I'm happy that she's stable, that she's in school, she's making friends, she's learning. And I do wish other children have the same opportunity.
Finally, what's a quote or mantra that helps you keep going when the work gets heavy?
There is one by Rumi, and this one I specifically love it. It's something like, it is time to start the journey. When will you begin that long journey into yourself? Because I feel that a lot of things just really start from within. You know, any journey starts from within. It's about you taking care of yourself, making sure that you're kind to people, to the world, to nature, and just really thinking about yourself and just making sure that you're living the life that you want. And so, yeah, it inspires me.
Yes. Thanks for listening to Sister Sister, a special series of the Teaching Peace podcast. These conversations remind us that peace is a practice and a shared responsibility. And if today's episode moved you, take a moment to reflect, share it with someone, and take action in whatever way you can. And if you made it to the end, thank you. Don't forget to like, smash that subscribe button, and share the podcast with your people. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep building peace.